pretty. Run away.
Hey baby, I'm limited edition. You wanna get with me?
Get lost. Oh, Hunter, it was so nice of you to take me shopping today. I really appreciated this. What do you think you're doing? Looking at another woman? Get out of here! Get out! Just keep moving! Just wait until I tell your brother about this! Welcome back, troglodytes, to the Trogly's Guitar Show. Today we have a 2007 Gibson Les Paul Goddess. This is one beautiful Les Paul, and I've been hunting for the Roseburst for a while. The Goddess was a series of SGs and Les Pauls that were geared towards women. And that's not just because these instruments were pretty, they actually made them smaller, simplified them, and just tried to make them more attractive to women in general. So let's go ahead and go over all the unique features of the Les Paul Goddess. First, we have to start with the finish options, because these are just magnificently gorgeous. There were 5 different offerings in the Goddess lineup. There's Violet Burst, Roseburst, Iceburst, Skyburst, and Ebony. Each of those options were available in both the Les Paul and SG body shapes. But with each of those instruments also came a specially wound pickup. These are Gibson's 490R 498T series. But that set of pickups isn't special in itself. They use special colored wirings to wind these pickups. And the windings would complement the finish. For example, this Roseburst one, it gets a nice dark crimson red colored wiring. Whereas the black one, it doesn't match the finish, but they used a copper color wiring. The Violet Burst got purple, and then the Ice and Skyburst both got blue. Personally, I dig the Violet and Roseburst. They are my favorites, and they generally are the most expensive to convince people to sell. However, the one thing I dislike about the Goddess series is the backs of them are black. So they're kind of boring in comparison to the beautiful top. The Skyburst will have a slightly dark blue back, but my favorite Goddess in terms of the backside has to be the Iceburst, because they left it natural. And pair that with that white top, that one just reminds me of some yogurt. It's the yogurt Les Paul, so definitely check out that video. Another thing to go over with the finish of these instruments is the Gibson logo also will match the finish. So Violet Burst gets a purple, Rose gets red, Skyburst gets blue, and Ice and Black kind of get left out because the natural white color just matches their finishes the best. But now let's talk about the next feature of these instruments, simplicity. Now I don't know what Gibson's trying to say by marketing a simplistic guitar to women, but that's what they did. So we've got 2 pickups here, and you just have a master volume with a master tone. These knobs are special for the Goddess series. Gibson later used something very similar to this on the high performance models. And gone is the bridge and tailpiece system. It's just a simple wrap tail. But something that kind of goes against simplistic is this has locking Grover tuners. Now these aren't your normal locking tuners by any means. They don't lock from the back. They lock from the top, and they kind of stick out a lot further than your regular tuner. These are kind of a pain to set up because you have to turn these and then line up the holes, and then once you put your string through, you have to turn them again to lock them down. I'm not a huge fan of these, so if you're looking at a Goddess and somebody has replaced the tuners, don't let that bother you. To further the marketing for these, they chambered these guitars so they are relatively lightweight. This one weighs in just a hair over 7 pounds. However, if you take into account the smaller body, it really doesn't weigh that much less compared to other chambered instruments. But let's talk about the body sizes here. The body is 3/16 of an inch shorter than a regular Les Paul standard. The width of this instrument running this way is a 1/2 inch shorter, and they made the nut width more narrow. This one I measured a 1.56 inch nut, and usually Gibson uses something close to 1.7 inches as a frame of reference. But if you're like me, it's kind of hard to visualize numbers when they're that small, so let's compare this to a Les Paul standard. This is a 1981 Les Paul Deluxe that was routed for humbuckers. You can kind of see the size differences here, as well as the tailpiece versus wrap tail. And here we'll show you the body thicknesses. These instruments are pretty much based on a Les Paul standard. You have a maple top paired with a mahogany body and a mahogany neck with, get this, a nice sweet ebony fretboard. So for a Gibson USA guitar to have an ebony fretboard, that's why I know these things will continue to hold and increase in value. But now let me tell you of a defect that is very common with Gibson guitars from the mid-90s to about the mid to late 2000s. On that span of 10 to 15 years, what happens is a very small gap will form between the fret edge binding, basically the nibs, and the fret itself. And that means if you're bending the string, sometimes it will get caught in that gap, and it makes playing that guitar kind of frustrating. And the Goddess series is usually heavily plagued with that. Now, it's a fairly simple fix if you have like a fret file or something like that, or you just take the nibs off. I can tell somebody has kind of filed this one down. You can see some tooling marks here. But definitely be aware of that if you're buying from this era of Gibson. Ask the sellers if there's a gap. Now, it's not all playing styles that'll get hung up on that. Personally, for me, when I play those instruments, I never even notice it, but I always make sure to check within that era. That way I can at least disclose it. The Goddess series featured binding along the top as well as along the fretboard, and they had stock pure white pickup rings, and it used to have a white poker chip as well. And I find that the fretboard markers are usually more crisp white on these models as well. When these instruments were first introduced, they were not that popular. They were only a little bit more than $1,000, but nowadays you can see them selling for 2, almost 3 times that amount. But what's kind of unique about right now is there's one of every color for sale on reverb.com, as well as some duplicates. I've been tracking these things for a few years, and you used to only ever see one of these things show up at a time. So if you're interested in a Goddess, I highly suggest making a move on one of these Reverb offerings now, because the competition is high, and the prices have been the lowest I've seen on these in a while. So overall, I love the Goddess series. You don't have to be a woman to enjoy this guitar. They're pretty guitars, but they're just a lot of fun. But these are just excellent playing and sounding guitars. Now that we know a little bit about the Les Paul Goddess series, let's go ahead and hear how this one sounds. Now that we know how this instrument sounds, let's go ahead and review its condition. Now you can tell when Gibson sprayed the red over this Gibson logo, they weren't very neat. They just kind of sprayed over the top half of the headstock. The other goddesses I've seen were usually a little bit more neater than that, but it could just be because the red is easier to see on top of the black. Another thing is the Les Paul model silkscreen is also a different color on these instruments. This one has a slight rosy tint to it. You have your original Goddess truss rod cover on here, and the truss rod works perfectly. I just cleaned and conditioned the fretboard and polished the frets up. I saw next to no fret wear, so you have nothing to worry about on that. As I mentioned previously in the review of this, it looks like somebody has done the filing to get rid of that gap, because you can see some very light tooling marks around the fret edge binding. But if you weren't looking for it, you wouldn't see it. Also, as is common to see, you have an outline formed around where the nut actually ends and the neck begins. And unfortunately, that is on the side that you'll see while you're playing. However, the treble side does not have that at this time. Face of the guitar, it's got some scratches here. I'll just run the light over so you can see it all. That kind of comes with this being a gloss finish on the top. But something that's magical about these is the back is actually a matte finish. So you've got the comfort and playability rubbing against you and on the neck, but you still have that beautiful gloss finish on the front. So you've got some fingerprints, light impressions, and scratches. But overall, it's actually in pretty good shape here. The poker chip is missing. It originally would have had a pure white one that said rhythm and treble. But if we're being honest here, I think it looks pretty good without the poker chip. Original 490R, 498T red colored bobbins in the pickups. Original compensated tailpiece. And these aren't the original knobs to this guitar. They actually came from a different Goddess. If I remember my stories correctly, one of these came from a black Goddess and the other one was from a purple Goddess. Back of the instrument, serial number 0000970 So that makes that a 9th day of the year, 2007. You've got some light marks on the back of the neck, but nothing you have to worry about break, crack, or repair-wise. Nice slim 60s neck profile on these, with just your light handling marks here. Back of the instrument, it's not really chewed up by any means. You do have some scratches. I mean, this thing definitely was played. It was just well taken care of. You can see this back control plate still has the plastic over on top of it. Now, when I took a look inside, it almost looks like somebody had different pickups in here at one point in time, but they have been restored back to original. I mean, the soldering work, it looks good, but it just doesn't quite look Gibson quality good. We'll take a quick look around the edges of the instrument as well. You even still have the stock strap buttons on this one. That's usually the first thing to go. So everything's looking good here. Time for the Blacklight. You can definitely tell this one's been a case queen. It does not glow a lot, mainly because it hasn't seen the sun. But it does glow a little bit, but I love the way that those pickup rings do. Back of the instrument, again, you can see that light glow that we're looking for. But nothing really too major to make note of here. Back of the neck is also looking good. No breaks, cracks, or repairs have been revealed. And the face of the headstock has the same even glow. I don't know what it is about the Goddess series, but you can rarely ever find these darn things with their original cases, because they're actually specially built for that run and they're slightly smaller. So I don't know what people do with those things, because they're not going to fit anything else. But this is a regular Les Paul hardshell case. It's actually fairly worn. You can see you've got lots of tears and scuff to the Tolex. We'll kind of take a quick look at that here. You've kind of got some staining. I'm sure this would clean off a little bit too if you wanted to. But down here you can see the Tolex is kind of lifting, but you know, just don't mess with it and it'll be just fine. 2, 4, and a 5th back latch. And the interior is white, just like the original case would be. It's got heel support, double neck rest. You can see you've got some dirt from having dirty strings at one point in time, but everything else is looking good. Now the side-to-side motion, it's not the worst, it's not the best either. And up and down you can see it definitely moves, but I'll put you some extra bubble wrap in there just to tighten up that fit. If you think you might be interested in being the next owner of this rare Roseburst Gibson Les Paul Goddess, feel free to check out that link in the description that will take you to the Reverb for Sale ad. Thank you troglodytes for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and we will see you tomorrow on the next episode. Take care.